Well, again, welcome to Palm Sunday. On this day would be if I was an airline pilot. Dave Boyer, I think he's right there somewhere. If I was an airline pilot and you were on my plane, right now is when I'd come in and over the intercom and say something like, "Ladies and gentlemen, we are entering our final descent into Easter. Please sit down and prepare yourself for a very busy week." There is no getting to Easter without the Passion, which is where we are today. Well, this is an interesting service. We start with all glory, laud, and honor in the palms, and we end with this, what we're about to do, which is read the Passion narrative. And on this day, I preach before we have our gospel reading. It's the one time a year I do so. Because in the reading we're about to hear, there's so many parts. It's so rich. I find that if I try and preach after it, I only narrow its ability to speak into your life and to mine. So I want to speak before it, but I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you, and it's not going to happen unless you try. Try to hear this story with new ears. Try. I know you've been challenged to do that before, but try again this year to hear it anew. Let it speak to you. Let it even surprise you somehow. Let it lead you. I read an interesting, I think a wonderful quote by Peter Kreeft this week. He said this: "A tiny bit of new insight into great things is more valuable than enormous new knowledge of tiny things. And when compared to God's love, everything is tiny. Tiny new insights into great things are enormously valuable." So on this day, as we approach this story of the Passion, let us seek for something tiny that means so very much to us personally. I do want to lift up one thing today before we begin, one perspective. And it's, I had actually written a whole nother perspective. But then last night, I was on my way to a family wedding out of town last night, and it struck me what this story really means to me this year. When I was 17 years old, I'm not proud of this, kids, for the record, but when I was 17 years old, I got the boot. I got the boot from my dad. He kicked me out of the house for my own behavior. He had tried everything. This was not lack of his trying. It was right of him to do so. And so I lived in my truck for a few months and had a pity party, you can imagine, as a 17-year-old. But today, when I've recently heard stories of children living in vehicles and on couches, and when I reflect upon their story and mine, there's something greatly different about my story. Because when I think back on those days, I always knew that if my back were really against the wall, if someone was hurting me, if you knew my father, if I was being held captive, being hurt, you better look out. He was a fearless man who loved me despite he didn't like me. He loved me. And he was coming. I knew he would come. I always knew he would come. I was so very blessed to have a father who, believe me, our love is as broken as anybody else's love with their father. But it is a real love. And he communicated that to me. It made a difference. When I think about the story that we're about to hear, I think if we hear it well for ourselves, what we will hear is the story of our daddy. Of our daddy who hears that something's hurting his children. And he's a daddy that says, I don't care what it costs, I'm coming. I'm coming, even through the messiness of the story. This story is so messy you're about to hear. It's almost like real life, messy. He's coming. He's done this for us because that's who he is. This is the passion of your daddy. And when we hear this story, it reminds us that yes, he's done it for us. It is who he is, and he's coming again. Whether it be in your life these days with your depression, with your illness, with your grief, whatever it is, he's coming. He will not neglect you. And I believe firmly on the hour of your death and mine, Our God will not love us because of what we did. He will love us because we are His children. And in that hour, no matter what you've done, He's coming. He's coming for you. He will not let you suffer forever. Let us try with new ears, despite if you resonate with this story or not. Let us hear this story. Hear this messy story. And pray for God to go. To wherever we are in our faith, in our life, come. Meet us and lead us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.